Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 109th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded discussion. Today, our panel will discuss NFL players refusing to stand for our national anthem in protest of the oppression of African Americans. That was a long sentence, but I'm not going to read it twice. You'll catch on before we're done. Our panel today, starting on my left, is Patty Haskins, retired math teacher and member of the Wadsworth City Council. On her left is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&D Financial Services. On his left is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. Patty, in recent weeks, the country has been in a minor uproar over the steadily increasing number of football players, starting with Colin Kaepernick, who explained his actions as a protest against black oppression, and spreading to other players down to all of Pee Wee football. Saw that on television.
Yeah,
it was
I saw
a
one
Pee Wee
team.
football team. Since these actions are felt to be highly offensive to millions of people, both black and white, do you think they should be regarded as racial harassment and treated accordingly?
Well, I wouldn't classify it as racial harassment or as treated accordingly. I think when we look back at it, it was originally started by Colin Kaepernick. And one of the interesting things I found out about him is when he originally had decided to protest, he was going to sit. And he was told by fellow players that that would be disrespectful and suggested that he kneel and that that might be a more respectful way to handle his opposition. I really didn't see that gaining a lot of ground, though, until after President Trump went on that little bit of a tirade on the news, where he stated, he used a profanity to refer to Colin Kaepernick, told the owners they should fire him, and also was very upset about the fact that he felt that football was being, I'm not going to use the term he used, but it was not as rough as it should be. That these players ought to be, if you recall, he said, those players make those big hits and then it's a 15-yard penalty. And to make a comment like that when there is all of the information about head trauma and damage that is done to football players, there is a reason for that. What happened then as a result, we saw an increase, a tremendous increase in the amount of protest on the sidelines where this was in concern and people were standing basically backing Colin Kaepernick, who, by the way, is not in the league anymore. Why Trump chose to bring it up at that time, I'm not sure. I have an idea. He'd had a particularly bad week that week. The health care bill had been defeated. It was revealed that Ivanka and Jared's emails were being done on a private email.
Is this about taking a knee at
Yes, it is.
for the national anthem?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
It was about that. There was also criticism of the way he handled Puerto Rico, and a number of other issues. And I think he has a tendency to deflect. So he had all of these bad things, so I'm going to bring this issue up. And he has done that in many cases. Now, whether he did that or not, I don't know. But then there was a strong reaction. Now, as a fan of football, and you watch that, if you're a veteran, especially if you're a wounded veteran, you're definitely going to be offended by it because you don't understand the message that's behind it. I don't think that there is ever a protest, though, where people are not offended. That's kind of what makes it a protest. I've heard figures that something like 60% of the country was against Martin Luther King when he marched against oppression in his time, and that the bus boycotts were not popular, but they were drawing attention to an issue that was egregious, and I think that's what's happening here. Now, personally, would I rather see them do it a different way? Absolutely. I just can't personally see myself not standing for the national anthem. So whether that was the best choice, I'm not sure. However, it did bring attention to the issue, and people are starting to discuss it. The players have changed, many of them, in the way that they're doing it. Some are kneeling before the anthem and then standing for the anthem. So there has been some movement. And if it brings attention to this, that's great. We also have to examine the fact that there is freedom of speech in this country, and that those players have the right to make that comment and to have that freedom of speech. And to say that they don't, or that I've been hearing so much the last couple of days about the gun control, and that the right to hold guns is sacrosanct. And there are those that are saying you can't touch that, whether you agree with it or not. But we can touch the First Amendment and say that freedom of speech can be abridged. So I question that. Now, of course, as a fan of the sport, you may choose not, you have every right then not to go to the game, to burn your jersey, to take whatever action you like. But to bring discussion about the topic, I think, is important.
You have given us enough material for 3 more programs, I think.
I've been thinking about a lot the last few days.
I can tell that you have, and
Yeah.
I question your timing of the events, but we'll move on from there. My question, though, Brian, and since we have
Patty was trying to filibuster.
Yeah, it was. I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it would turn into a Trump dump at some point. But,
I've not been happy with it.
no, of course not.
Yeah.
No, when I look at how many millions of people are just highly offended by the idea, first of all, that there is this tremendous oppression of black people in this country, particularly the way Kaepernick mentioned it. He was talking about the shooting of unarmed blacks by police. Yeah. And that is highly offensive to a lot of people, and people have been fired for making a lot less offensive comments than that. So I wonder if we could sort of turn the...
Sure.
Yeah.
Read a great op-ed piece by a Wall Street Journal editor, a black gentleman that was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. And you can look it up. It was probably about 4 days ago. Yeah. His beliefs growing up was that he didn't participate in the Pledge of Allegiance, didn't stand for the national anthem because it's part of his belief, his religion. And I'm not an expert on other religions, but the way he presented it in his article was that was an idolatry. And that he took a lot of guff for that growing up, because people didn't understand that. And as he grew older, his opinions changed, and
he changed religions.
Changed religions, yes. And now he stands for the national anthem. He cites the pledge. He puts his hand over his heart and all that kind of stuff. And in part of this, he basically said, he looked back at the statistics, and he said that in whatever study you look at, this particular issue has improved over a 15, 20-year period. There is less shootings of black people by police. There was another article that talked about the other NFL player that this sort of started to get more legs. He claimed that a policeman put a gun to his head. And then the police department, after their investigation, released the body cam footage as well as other footage that they had, and that was completely not true. He was treated with respect. So it seems that when you have a stage, and this is where I've sort of come down on this, when your stage is a national audience, and the opening of a football game is a national audience, and you want to make a statement, that's where you're gonna make it. I don't believe that those players, they can do whatever they want off of that stage. They're free to do whatever they want. But when they walk onto that field, they are employees of that professional football team. Mm-hmm. And if the NFL is going to be consistent with all their rules and policies, and you can go back, you don't have to go back very far. Bill Belichick started cutting off his sleeves of his shirt because he didn't want to have the NFL logo on it because they all have to wear NFL approved logo stuff. We had the situation with the Dallas Cowboys. They wanted to put something on their cleats, and they were banned from doing that.
Support of
the policemen on the bottom of their shoes. We had Tim Tebow take a knee. It seems to me that if you're a religious person and you catch the pass in the end zone and you cross yourself, everything, they go bonkers over that. You can't do that. But when you have a player that decides he wants to come out against oppression, then that's okay. So that's where, I just feel like you're an employee. There should be policies about that. They're losing audience. Most of the people that go to those games are very patriotic people. A ticket to the game, I don't know, I haven't been to a game in a while, it's probably $70, $80.
Yeah.
It's a serious amount of money that people are spending to go. And I was raised in a household that you took off your hat, and you stood there with your hand over your heart, and if you knew the song, you sang it. You obviously knew the Pledge of Allegiance, and you respected that flag for the people that had gone on before and offered a sacrifice for us to do these types of things. So, they have a right to. I don't argue with that. Yeah. You just don't have that right to do that on that particular stage at that particular moment. That's the way I feel about it.
I've had a number of thoughts about that. Some responses to what's said here, particularly that last statement of yours. Yeah, that's an act of civil disobedience, and if it's against the rules of your workplace, then your boss has a right to even fire you. Mm-hmm. That's his right too. You have the right to protest in your workplace or wherever. I know I've done some of that. In the Vietnam War situation, I protested in my workplace. I paid for it, but I protested. I brought an interesting article, and I don't know if it's true, along the lines of what you said, Patty, about the other players commenting that kneeling. He did sit for the first couple, and the story I read was that a Marine officer contacted him about this and offered to meet with him and discuss it. And what came out of that was the Marine officer said, "I respect your right to do this. I think it's probably going to be controversial," but pointed out that when a soldier passes, and at the funeral, the flag is folded and presented to the spouse, and the Marine kneels, which shows respect for both the fallen soldier and the flag. And that, therefore, the Marine says, "Why don't you kneel?" We'll show the respect for that. Now, that puts a little bit different thing on it, I don't know. I agree with you, Brian. I grew up the same way. And still, if I'm at a parade and a flag goes by, I put my hand over my heart. I wouldn't do it. However, if I actually watch football, I probably would not watch football because the players are kneeling. And I don't think that it would have been such a big fuss, really, if the owners, the wealthy owners who donated to Mr. Trump's campaign hadn't got offended by his remarks and said, "Go ahead, boys, and I'll stand with you." Right. So we seem to be in the process, this country, of reacting to Donald Trump, which is, I think, the way he wants it. I think he's ego-driven, frankly, And I don't think that's a Republican or Democratic statement. That's just an observation.
Yep.
That's
do you know any politicians who aren't ego-driven?
No, I don't. Yeah. But he's a little bigger than some. His egos are bigger than his hands, that's for sure.
Sort of along those
that's
lines.
Beneath you, Ron.
I don't know if, to Patty's point about sort of deflecting, it's the tail wagging the dog, sort of, that got started in the Bill Clinton administration with some of the things that they were doing. To be honest with you, I don't think the man's smart enough to do that kind of stuff because he's so impulsive.
That's true.
His Twitter, if you ever follow him, it's just all over the place, and it's a lashing out. It's not a real thought out thing. He is just putting out there whatever he's thinking at the moment, and those particular tweets that they refer to about the NFL and the players, those are just the ruminations of a old guy laying in bed
He actually did that in a speech.
Well, he did that too.
Yeah.
He followed it up, and all that kind of stuff. But I just don't think he's.
No, I actually
don't
I
send any
actually
hate
think-
mail, but I really don't think he's that smart. He might be devious.
I think he's
You know,
smart.
you
I
know,
don't really like to call him stupid. 'cause I
Some
think
people
he's
say,
bright.
that, well, they called him a moron recently. Tillerson supposedly called him a moron, but
He's denying that, by the
he's
way.
denying that. But when you throw a tweet out there that about North Korea, what a very sensitive situation when you've
Robert,
got
yeah.
your Secretary of State that's
Okay, this is
the South.
that
We're
would
devolving.
be a
Sorry.
topic for another day.
I have a question.
we're all oppressed.
You mentioned, attendance at football. Do you think attendance will go down if the team's good, or will it just go down for a team?
It may go down for a team temporarily.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's, sports fans are sports fans, and if that team starts to win,
Right.
I bet everybody will go out and back them, no matter
Right.
what they're doing.
Yeah.
Now, if the team is like our Browns, unfortunately,
They might be in a slump.
They might, a slump is not the word for it,
How many
but
years has this been now?
yeah.
Well,
But
they lost to a team who hadn't won a game yet by 31-2 or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
yeah, and people won't go to the game, and I'm sure there are some that won't go because of that issue. But there's a lot that just won't go.
But there's a lot of other stuff that goes along with that the NFL makes
Sale of merchandise.
billions of dollars
Yeah.
on merchandising, the shirts, the
And
hats.
the more people burn
all
the
that-
shirts, the increases
Yeah.
the demand.
for other people's shirts and all that kind of stuff. It's a business and it's a protected monopoly in this country. And the fact of the matter is, tax dollars, most stadiums have been funded or subsidized by some tax dollars. So
Cleveland. Big
I
time.
really think that they really should take that into consideration. I would like to see maybe if they want to get into a circle and have a prayer. We'll see how quickly that ends. How many lawsuits that creates and how uncomfortable the NFL is about that.
Yeah.
But
Getting back to the idea of oppression, I think this whole episode is sort of fanning the flames of racial discord unnecessarily. The whole idea of oppression is horribly exaggerated to begin with. The idea of white privilege is being touted and exaggerated, and I think that it is a bad idea on the part of the media to even pay attention to this business. I would have rather the day Kaepernick took the knee, the cameras immediately went to the flag, or the person singing the national anthem, or whatever. But the idea of exaggerating the idea of black oppression is not doing racial reconciliation any good at all. And that was sort of my point.
I think black oppression still exists.
Yes.
We are whites. We are not faced with that same situation. We don't live that life. And I think that if you say what's gotten better, well, but it's not better yet. I mean, and it still exists.
Oh, it is
and to draw
tremendously
attention.
better. When I think about prior to 1964, when the racial discrimination was legal all over the place. In the workplace, in the place where I worked, a black was limited as to what jobs that they were going to be qualified for. After 1964, the compliance was amazing. And since that time, we've had affirmative action, and we've had diversity goals, we've had hate speech laws. There are all kinds of protections against black oppression, but people want to continue to insist.
But it still exists,
It
and that's
does exist, but to
but
nowhere
to
near
say,
the scale.
Just because it's not near the scale doesn't mean that what exists isn't wrong.
No, it is absolutely
and in
wrong.
some cases, I think it is increasing because of our tendency to say, oh, it doesn't exist anymore, or it's so much better, why even bother with it? It is still an issue. And I feel it's difficult for me to discuss this issue not being a black person and not knowing what that
But
is
you're
like.
you're a white person, and that's where the accusations are aimed.
Well, I think just recently, let's put this, Patty is a woman, obviously, and there are plenty of women out there that feel that they've been oppressed, the glass ceiling, all that kind of stuff. just recently, keeping on the sports thing, Cam Newton, I don't know if you heard about this, he was in a press conference, and a female reporter asked him about a particular part of the game and about specific routes. And he chuckled. And I watched the whole thing. He just sort of laughed, and it was it's kind of funny that, you know, you're talking about routes. I just never thought that, and you would have thought he had taken that lady out and strung her up or embarrassed her. He was just sort of chuckling that, you know, here this lady who, you know, in his experience would probably not ask that type of a question. It was kind of funny to him. He wasn't trying to offend her.
That's the problem. It shouldn't have been funny to him, though.
Yeah, but see, the thing is,
that's the problem.
But see, the thing is,
Exactly my point. Exactly my point. Whenever anything can possibly be interpreted
right,
as
being offended,
it's going to be.
Yeah, everybody. We've got this very short fuse when it comes to being offended.
There was a guy who he got fired from Yahoo or Google, one of the
Google,
because he had made a comment about women not being represented in the engineering and programming ranks as much as men are, and he said something about them not leaning toward those careers. He got fired for saying that.
Yeah.
And he wrote an article where he pointed out something. He said that there are people that when they look at something where there's not an equal representation of women, black, the only thing they can think of is discrimination. There can't possibly be another explanation. Well, there are other explanations.
Right, but you don't ignore that explanation, though. As being part of, like you said, there's other things that can be part of it.
No, he didn't ignore it.
That can be part of the issue.
He had given a very succinct definition or explanation.
It was an internal memo that he wrote on an intranet with the company that was supposed to be. But it was just within the company. He was expressing himself, but once again, his expression, his so-called freedom of expression, ran, as far as they were concerned, counter to their culture. So he was fired. Yeah. So why, you know, why can't that same policy, you know, that same feeling apply on the other side?
And the employer had
oversensitivity.
Oversensitivity.
Yes, right, and I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, if everybody's going to get offended, there's no discussion. We don't have this. If all of a sudden, you know, she starts screaming and he starts screaming and we don't get anywhere. But you know, this notion that somehow, and it happens because when someone like me tries to explain about a female issue, you're laughed at. Because how do you know that? You haven't walked a mile in my shoes, you know. So
and vice versa.
And vice versa, you know. Yeah. So you really need to back away and say, let's just not be so quick to get offended about it. Can we have a discussion about it? And
but
you might have some.
There are people making millions of dollars out there in nonprofits with huge salaries because of these issues. Elizabeth Warren continues to talk about this gender wage gap, even though it has been explained over and over again. It is not about discrimination. It is not. But that doesn't keep her from saying it over and over again. She gets money from the nonprofits and all that. And the NAACP, where would they be without black oppression?
Well, some of the theories out there. You know, I heard Rush Limbaugh speak, I forget, it's about a week ago or so, and he was...
You listen to Rush Limbaugh?
Occasionally. I listen to a lot of things. You'd be surprised.
God bless you.
I know.
That's why
but he had made the comment that all of the changes in football and what's going on and so forth was an attempt by the left to take away the masculinity of men. And I thought, what? Where, you know, you hear some weird theories out there.
You see, now Rush Limbaugh has to say stuff like that in order to keep his multi-million-dollar salary. Really, people make a living on generating
But you know, the sad part is people believe that. They hear that and they go, Rush said.
Well, the same way.
But the problem is, Patty, you can't talk about this because you're not a man.
Yeah,
that's true.
And that's the problem.
But I am a member of the left, and I have no desire to take away the masculinity.
I would.
I don't think.
I mean, but see, that's the sad commentary where we're at today. You know,
right.
You have to be part of that group, been oppressed, your street cred, has to be there before you can even say anything. Poor Ron and I think we're starting to become an oppressed. We better get together.
Oh, you've been oppressed all your life.
I'm waiting
I don't
for
know.
a little bit of
I
that.
belong to one of the largest lobbying groups in the world, the AARP.
Uh-oh.
You got to watch out, fella.
I'm
They
watching
are
that.
actually very strong.
One other thing I wanted to point out, I think that part of all of this discussion leads back to liberal media and why they exaggerate. This story, taking a knee, should never have been covered in the first place as far as I'm concerned. But I just want to read a quote from somebody. This woman said, "If they don't do anything when children are murdered, I have no hope that the Republicans, will ever do the right thing. I'm actually not even sympathetic because country music fans often represent Republican gun toters."
I heard, who said that?
That was the lawyer for CBS.
That was the
got
one that was
fired.
fired.
She
got
did.
fired.
That was the one that was fired.
She did get fired.
Yeah,
But here's
that's what
the
I thought.
question.
Yeah.
Here's the question. How in the world does somebody with that kind of an attitude ever belong in the upper ranks of a network?
Yeah.
Unless her...
And it wasn't something that she published on air. It was I believe it was a tweet that she
did it. She
sent
put it on
out.
Twitter, yeah.
That it was. So,
Yeah.
of course, I mean, with some of the things that are going on Twitter,
She actually, she wrote it in social media. Actually,
Yeah.
actually put
I
it
suppose
down.
there's a fine line against expressing what you feel passionately and adhering to what's polite in society.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's a tough way for something if you really feel about it. You know.
Yeah, it's unacceptable on so many different levels.
Well, a lot of passion is coming out now about, the gun control. One of the very first things I heard about the shooting in Las Vegas was National Rifle Association. I was at Nancy Pelosi or whoever using the opportunity to go into that attack again.
don't get me started.
I wish, well, I tell you what, I would like to get you started, and if you can explain how in the world you can enforce these gun control laws. We can't.
Well, it depends on what the law is. For example, there's a big movement now.
The gun that he used, the dent was outlawed in 1935.
Yeah, but
We're out of
he had the bump stocks to
Okay,
add on
thank
to
you very
it.
much, folks.
Yeah.